everybody, and welcome to my YouTube channel, All That Is. I'm so glad to have you here with us today. I just want to welcome my guest, my beloved sister Paula, who has been on the channel before, twice before, and we've had some really, really rich conversations. And so I recently reconnected with Paula through our common networks, and we just got a call to have this conversation once again and just catch up and see what has been happening since we last had a conversation like this. So welcome to the show, and grab a tea, grab a coffee, whatever your drink is, and just sit back and enjoy this conversation with Paula and myself. Welcome to the show, Paula.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
It's so lovely to see you. And like I said just before we got on, it's been since March, I suppose, of this year that we had our interview, and so much has happened, in your life and in mine, and you've been traveling so much. And I would love to hear about your stories because your stories are always so rich, and it dances between the spiritual world, between that grid working aspect, and just being you, that divine feminine that you are, and exploring these lands and exploring your own ascension journey. So I'm happy to explore all of those potentials with you and just do like a catch up on where we are at in each other's lives. So welcome, 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 and just pick up where we left off, I suppose. I know the last time I interviewed you, we had talked briefly about France, and how you had wanted to go to France and how you felt really drawn to the land and connected to the land. And you had been there before, but you just felt that, France was something that you felt very at home. And then I think you texted me a few months later and said that there is this potential of me going to France. And so I was so excited for you that, that you're actually realizing your dreams. But you tell me that that particular opportunity didn't unfold. So I'd love to hear about what your travels and what your adventures have been about since we last talked.
I feel like you come in at very divine times when I've just had like all of these experiences and I just kind of like need to talk through them and process them. And this is one of those times. Yeah, so it's really interesting because that invitation I feel like was the calling. And even if it didn't materialize in that specific way, I think that was perfect. Because I had also been feeling this yearning to go back to the US. It's my adoptive motherland, is what I call it. Um, and I have this really difficult relationship with the United States just because it's, everything that people know that it is. It's capitalistic, it's individualistic, it's all of these things. And I really saw it in real time. Like I was 10 years old when I moved there. So I was like old enough to notice what was happening, like old enough to notice that the food didn't taste good there. The food didn't taste like anything, it tasted like plastic. I feel like I developed an eating disorder shortly after moving there just because I didn't feel like I was being nourished. Um, Old enough to notice that like this country was splitting my family apart, right? Like I had come from Mexico where um the family unit is so sacred and so important. And I was so close to my brother and my sister and my mother, and like we lived in a multi-generational household, and I just saw like living in the United States tear my family apart. And so there's this aspect of it where I was again old enough to notice all these things happening, but like I was 10 years old, so I didn't have any agency to do anything about it. And it had been a year and a half since I had been back to the US at this point, and like 4 years since I had lived in the US fully. So when I went back this time around, it almost was like I was coming back as my 10-year-old self, kind of like noticing all these things again, being aware of them, but now I'm an adult. And so now I do have agency. I can choose whether to eat all of that crappy junk food or not. I can choose whether to engage in like watching TV and like all these things, right? And so that was really interesting. And it was almost like healing that aspect of my inner child. But there was also a huge part of me that was grieving for all the people that are still kind of like trapped in this. society that is actively consuming them. And so it felt really hard being back there. And then, yeah, this friend who had invited me to come visit him and help him to like pack up his life to move to France, he ended up deciding not to go to France. Like initially he didn't get the job, but then they told him that maybe he could still go, and he was like, no, I want to do what's safe, I want to stay here. And so then I was kind of like feeling a little bit stuck. I was like, oh no, I'm like in the US, I'm not in Mexico anymore, I'm not in my safe place. I had uprooted myself from the place where I had been living there for 8 months, which, you know, I had been nomadic for the past 4 years. And so this is the place where I had been living the longest since I became a nomad. 8 months is a really long time for me to stay still. And so I uprooted myself from this place where I had kind of created a sense of community, created a sense of safety. And then I was kind of just like in this place that didn't feel good. And so then I started praying. I was like, well, if I'm not supposed to be here, like, where should I go? Like, if I'm really supposed to go to France, like, start giving me signs, like, make it really clear that I'm supposed to go to France. And as soon as I said this prayer, like, I started seeing France everywhere. Like, it would happen in conversations. I would be listening to a podcast and it would talk about France. Like, France just showed up, like, on a coffee table book. I would be walking by the street and I'd see France, like, France, France, France everywhere. And so then I was talking to my mother, and it was around my birthday, and I was talking to my mother, and she was like, I will pay for your ticket to go to France. And so it just like didn't happen in the way that I initially expected that it would happen, but it's still like the path opened up for me to go to France. And so when I got to the US, it felt like a homecoming, like the prodigal daughter returning. Like there were tears streaming down my face as I was like landing on the tarmac. It felt almost like one of those ads where like soldiers are returning home. Like it was, yeah. And as I was leaving on the plane, it felt like jailbreak. Like I was leaving this prison planet, or I don't know, dystopian place. So it was a really interesting landing and like leaving. Um, and then I got to France, and it was a big part of it was really healing myself because while I was in the US, I kind of like picked up a lot of these almost viruses, I would say, that I had picked up while I had been there, like this hatred towards my body, this like inability to fully nourish myself. And so it was like the first month I was here was really about just reestablishing routine, living on my own, um,
And
like
where did
buying
you
food from the
land?
market.
Sorry
Oh,
to interrupt you. Where did you land in France?
I went to Perpignan, which is a border city. I flew into Barcelona, and then I met up with some friends for the weekend, and then I took a train into Perpignan, which is on the other side of Spain, on the other side of the Pyrenees. It's a really interesting city. Um, because Delhi went there at some point, and like he was really activated while he was there, and he called it the center of the universe, but essentially I think he just had like this spiritual experience is what I would call it, where he just started kind of like seeing timelines collapsing and receiving like all these mathematical equations that were kind of like answers to like secrets of the universe or something. So I think there's a lot of like spiritual activity in that city. um, it also houses four thorns from the crown of thorns that Jesus wore when he was crucified.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Um, so that was really interesting. Also, it was almost like, I don't know, I was walking down the streets. I was walking down Magdalene Street, and I was just like feeling really good, feeling liberation, which was something that I had been working towards all month. I was like, again, kind of feeling like I had been a little bit imprisoned while in the US, and I was finally feeling liberation. I was like feeling good, just walking around. And then these church bells start ringing, like, and it was midday. So it was like all the bells, right? Like the most bells that there could be in a day, 12 bells. And it was just calling me. It was like calling me into that church that I had never been to before. And it wasn't any church that was like listed on any of the touristic places. I had done like a tour as soon as I got to the city, not mentioned. Like, it wasn't mentioned in any of the guidebooks or anything, but I walk in and I instinctively knew to like go into this like small chapel off to one of the sides. And as soon as I got there, I just like immediately started weeping. Um, and then I realized what was housed there was these thorns that were on Jesus's head. And
Oh,
so for me, it's like these thorns contain some of Jesus's blood, some of Jesus's plasma, and he was a Christic being. So some of that Christic essence is held in those thorns. Like that plasma is still available for anybody sitting before it to receive. And I know, like the first time that I sat there, um, I passed out. Like I just fell asleep. It was such a strong, potent energy there that yeah, it just was hard to like sit there and be fully present. And I think it took me like three different visits before I could sit there and actually like fully absorb the energy from these thorns. And in that chapel, there was also this painting of the Immaculate Conception, which today is the day of the Immaculate Conception, by the way. So
yeah.
there was this painting of the Immaculate Conception, and I just formulated this prayer. Like, again, I was weeping and I was crying about like how I hadn't been treating my body right when I was in the US. Um, and so I was like asking God, I was like praying for repentance. I was asking God to forgive me for not having treated my body right and asking for forgiveness and asking for liberation for myself and for others. And then, also, like this particular painting of the Immaculate Conception was a virgin standing on top of a serpent. And so it inspired me to pray for like alignments to be able to connect with like the earth's ley lines, the dragon lines, the serpent lines in a better way. And then I also prayed to God to clear the way for me to become a mother. But like a true like whole like restoring holy mother on earth in a way. And then also I think she had like one of those sacred hearts, and so I prayed for alignment within my heart and the heart of everybody in humanity. So it was like, I don't know, it was a prayer that was inspired by everything that was there. But I don't know, I kind of just forgot about this, and then I went to Scotland. um And while I was in Scotland, even though I had completely forgotten this prayer, I essentially received everything that I had prayed for in this little church. And I just realized this. I went back to Perpignan for 4 days right before coming to Avignon, which is where I am now. And so while I was in that church revisiting, I started looking at my journal entries from like back in August, which was 4 months ago at this point. And I realized that I had prayed this prayer. And then I was like thinking back on everything that has happened since then. And I was like, wow, all of those things came true. It
Yeah.
was just amazing.
Wow. Wow. So powerful, hey? And I always it always amazes me how things unravel and how they manifest, right? It's like we have this tiny little wish in our heart, and if we surrender it to the creator, it's like it comes out in this beautiful manifestation way beyond our dreams, right? And it's just so perfect in its realization. So yeah, there's so many things that I want to talk about now, Paula, from what you've just told me. And it's just so beautiful how you've been able to follow your dream, follow your path, and be brave enough to receive those breadcrumbs, as they appear in your life. Right from just, packing up your life in the US to going to France, even though that initial plan didn't work out, and just following those breadcrumbs. I got goosebumps when you talked about the chapel in Magdalene Street. Um, it's all so connected to you as a divine being, as a divine mother entity, in this emanation of the divine mother. And I see you as being that pure being, that pure energy of the divine mother, and just following your path. It's just unraveling in the most beautiful way. And so I'm so happy that you've had this experience, especially following, your call to go to Scotland as well, because that's where they were as well, right? Yeshua and Mary Magdalene, they travel to Scotland
Yeah.
as well. And so there's all of these, these anchors where they sort of spread themselves in that during that lifetime. So yeah, how was Scotland?
Yeah, so again, I feel like that's kind of like where this prayer was answered in a way. I went there for this gathering, which I don't know, was kind of the idea was to realign the head of Alba with the spine of Albion. And during this gathering, everybody was talking about like feeling the presence of God and feeling so connected to God and feeling the love of God. And I just like was still kind of again reeling from my experience in the United States and just like really not feeling it. And so we would like do these ceremonies and they would be beautiful ceremonies intended to connect with the love of God. And again, I just was not feeling it. And so I remember in one of the ceremonies, like what came up for me was this Bible verse where Jesus is like on the cross and he's saying like, my God, why have you forsaken me? And that came up for me. I was like in the ceremony and I was not feeling this love of God and I felt forsaken by God. And so I was like, God, why have you forsaken me? And then I went the next day I was like guided to look it up and like to delve deeper into this passage. And it turns out that when Jesus was saying this, he was saying it to fulfill a prophecy. It wasn't because he was actually feeling forsaken, but he was referring to a psalm in the Old Testament. And so, like, this is something that everybody present at the crucifixion would have known. Like, they would have known the verses from the Old Testament, they would have known the Psalms. And so, whenever he was bringing up this psalm from the Old Testament, everybody would have like known to remember it. And in that psalm, it was essentially a prophecy. I forget if it was King Solomon or King David who wrote it, but it talks about how like his tunic would be like people would play dice to like cast lots for his tunic, and it talks about how he would have like a spear put through his side, and like it was essentially describing the passion, and it was predicted back in the Old Testament, like who knows how many years ago. And so that just kind of like, I don't know, I sat with that. It wasn't the answer that I wanted, right? Like I wanted to feel God's love, but it was kind of like maybe there's a sense of like this prophecy is being fulfilled in some way. And I don't know, I just need to sit with that. Anyway, that was just like the 4 days, which were again this conference, but then we went on um the sacred sites tour, which we went to a bunch of different places. But as you mentioned, there was Yeshua and Mary Magdalene were present in Scotland, and we ended up going into this one church. It was like a small nondescript chapel, very similar to Saint Mathieu in Perpignan, which like it's probably not on any guidebooks or anything. And in that chapel, there's this stained glass window of um, Jesus holding Mary Magdalene, and she's pregnant, and her water has just broken.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And underneath it has a scripture that says, what good Mary hath chosen shall not be taken from her. And as soon as I saw this, it was like so many things just happened at once. It was like, it felt like a spell break, and not just for me, but like a collective spell break. Like a friend who was there with me said that it felt like Ho'oponopono, but like for everybody, like a collective Ho'oponopono. And for me, it was like I saw my whole life flash before my eyes, and not like if I were dying or anything, but just I kind of saw all the ways in which I hadn't been living with my heart fully open to God. So it was another moment of repentance, or it was just like noticing all the ways in which I hadn't been fully letting God into my life. And so I don't know, I feel like it could be because my father got a brain tumor when I was 3 years old. So it could be related to that. It could be even earlier. I'm not sure. But I do know that, like, I have, and it all clicked in that moment that I have always felt so scared of loving, and not just like in a romantic sense, but like fully opening myself to love, loving my family members, loving my friends, loving, like, again, a romantic partner person, but like all forms of love, and like even God, I guess. And yeah, it just clicked in that moment that I hadn't been fully opening myself to love. And like in the same way that Mary's waters had just broken, it felt like my own waters broken. So I burst into tears. Like as soon as I saw that, like this full realization happened and I started crying. And it wasn't just like, tears streaming down my face, but it was like audible sobbing, like weeping in this church. I'm not even sure how long we were in there, probably like 15 minutes, but the whole time I was there, I was just like crying and crying and crying. And I was experiencing grief over the fact that I hadn't lived, like really lived, because I hadn't really loved my whole life. And there was also so much anger at God because, like, okay, so you're telling me that now it's safe to love, and like that's great, but also I'm 37 years old, and like, why did you make me suffer all these years? Anger at myself because, like, I had kind of been punishing myself all these years by not opening myself up to love. And I understand, like, again, it was this fear that it didn't feel safe to love. But there was still this anger towards myself, towards God, and this grieving of like the life that I hadn't fully lived up until now. And so there were all these different layers, and it felt like everything mattered in a completely new way, but nothing really mattered. And it was just like so many things happening all at once. Um, and Yeah, these emotions lasted probably all month. Like after that chapel encounter, I kept like openly weeping for the next month or so, just like these bouts of crying. Like initially it was every day I was crying. It was hard to even go to sleep. After a while it did get better. I ended up going to Avalon, which I think helped. It's known to be the heart chakra of the world. And so while I was there, I feel like it created this container where I was able to finally wrap myself in enough love where the crying stopped. And then as soon as I left, I started crying again. But it did feel like it was easier to cry after that. And it wasn't as frequent. Um, but yeah, that's kind of what I've been working through a lot is this encounter that I had, which again, going back to the prayer that I laid when I was in that church, St. Mathieu in Perpignan, it was like opening my heart in this like sacred heart kind of way, clearing the path or clearing any obstacles to me becoming like a holy mother figure. Um, and asking for forgiveness for not treating my body right. So like all of these prayers were answered in that church.
Oh, wow, so beautiful. I can see that path. You've painted such a beautiful picture, and it's almost like you've reached a higher octave within your ascension process. The last time we talked, it was like you exploring this fragmented self of your lost love, if you will, right? Of your higher self, your oversoul, which manifested very much in the physical for you. And so you were dealing with healing all of that. And then you went on to another level of exploring your energies through your travel, right? The last time we talked, which I think you had gone to on that El Camino trip in Spain, and you were exploring all of that. And so it was like you were, through your heart, exploring all of these aspects of love within your heart through these travels and, just healing your past, healing those fragmented energies to arrive at this point where you are now within that, I'm going to say Christed energy, because that's what it is. I think you're experiencing that in a whole new way, but within the embrace of the mother. And so it's like all of these things are manifesting in your life so beautifully. And it's so remarkable to see the path that you're following in order to live that heart-centered experience. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, it really is. Like, I know a lot of people get like truth bumps, like goosebumps whenever people speak like truth, like holiness. And I'm getting what I call now like truth tears. Like, whenever people speak about something so holy, so beautiful, like when people are speaking about their prophecy or people are speaking about Holy Mother, or like all of these like beautiful and profound things, I end up like tearing up. And it's like, again, what I call truth tears. And that's a development that happened after that church encounter.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's really something, isn't it? When you, especially when you work with these high beings, right? Like Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, Yeshua, it's like their path was so pure and it was so powerful. Like they've in a way planted the seeds for us to manifest in this lifetime, and that has been my experience as well in my exploration. It's like 2000 years ago, and what they lived is in a way they prophesied what we would be living now, and how we
Yeah.
would birth this new reality, this new higher octave of landing, of anchoring that Christ consciousness within our reality. And I'm seeing this on so many levels. It's manifesting by those divine mother energies that are coming into the forefront to bring in those powerful divine mother energies. And that's happened in my life. Over the months of June and July, I had like 7 divine beings come in, like divine feminine beings come in and like help
Mm.
me through this 7-day meditation. So I had like Isis, Kuan Yin, um, Tara, White Buffalo Calf Woman, Anna, the grandmother of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and Hathor. So it's like, all these beautiful divine feminine energies came in and they powerfully initiated me into this meditation series that they offered up to me, and that I'm now offering to the public to anchor that divine feminine energy into their own hearts. So it's like all of these energies are very much alive within the field, and it's like they are bringing in this higher consciousness into our reality so that we are able to expand our hearts and expand our minds and know that this is still a reality to be persevered, to be acknowledged, to pursue in our own ascension journey. Even though, they did it 2000 years ago, in my mind, time doesn't exist. So it's like they are collapsing that 2000 years into this now present moment and birthing what should have been birthed, in a way, right, during their lifetime. But for whatever reason, they faced that oppression as well. And so even though it was prophesied, that he, like you said, he had that prophecy from the Old Testament that he brought forward during that time of his life, through that verse that you just talked about. It's as if we are now reliving what he prophesied 2000 years ago. And so all
Yeah.
of these experiences that you are having, that I'm having, and countless other beings are, excuse me, are having, is just in a way bringing all of that to the forefront, bringing all of those energies to be experienced by us, that we are able to open our hearts. And for you, it's like you're having this first-hand experience of that heart coherence, that heart energy, and just opening up your heart to receiving all of this. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah. And as you were speaking about all of these beautiful sacred feminines, Holy Mother archetypes that came through for you, I was like, experiencing so much heart openness. It just felt really beautiful. Um, and yeah, with what you said, one of the sacred sites that we went to in Scotland was Callanish, which is a really ancient stone circle. I think it's like even older than Newgrange, even older than Stonehenge, even older than the pyramids of Egypt. and it's aligned to the lunar standstill, which only happens every 18 and a half years. And we were there on the lunar standstill.
Oh my goodness. Talk about
Yeah.
timing, hey? Wow, that's amazing.
And Shane had said, he was one of the people that we were there with. He had said that we were going to be holding ceremony there to collapse old timelines. Um, and we just laid down this really beautiful peace prayer. And then while we were there, we saw this like the sun was wrapped in this kind of like swirling rainbow. And then he was kind of looking it up, and it turns out that the Hopi have this swirling rainbow prophecy, which is about like when there's a swirling rainbow around the sun, the 12 tribes will unite to create a 13th rainbow tribe or something like that. But for me, it felt like that was true that we did collapse timelines because ever since I left there, it feels like I'll be guided to sacred sites and people will tell me the history. Like I'll be reading the history of it. I'll go on like a guided tour and people will be telling me like what happened there, like from history standpoint. And then I'll like hear inside myself, like I'll get this knowing like, no, this isn't actually what happened. This is like history or like story told through the victor's eyes, but that's not actually what happened. And like I'll be able to read underneath those overlays and actually receive the actual story, which is just like really interesting because yeah, like you said, afterwards I did the Camino de Santiago and I ended up in Santiago. And while I was there, what came through for me, and I'm still kind of piecing it together, but there's this part of me that believes that um so Santiago's mother was Maria Salome, who was one of the Marys that came into France, and then she ended up going to proselytize in Italy, and then Mary Magdalene stayed in France, and then Santiago went to Iberia. And then Joseph of Arimathea goes into England. So, like, the whole Holy Family kind of spread out to proselytize and spread the news of Christianity. Um, but so Maria Salome was mother to Santiago St. James and also to John who wrote Revelation. And there's this very small church in Santiago de Compostela that again it's like very small nondescript. I went there because I was craving matcha one day and then the cafe is like facing this cute little church, and while I was sitting there drinking my matcha, like this whole revelation came through for me, and it was this idea that in the Da Vinci Code and like some other people speak about how John wasn't like John was called John the Beloved. And so this was code for like Mary Magdalene. This was a way to hide Mary Magdalene in a way that was masculine so she could still live through. And so Maria Salome, in what I'm understanding now, is that Maria Salome was mother to Saint James and to John the Beloved, who wrote Revelation, who wrote Apocalypse in the Bible. But it was actually Mary Magdalene who wrote Revelations then. So if you go inside the church, there's like two statues. There's Mary Salome in like the altar, the focal point, and then she has her two sons on flanking her on either side.
And
It's
one of
called
which is Mary
Santiago.
Magdalene.
One of them is not Mary Magdalene, but it's a very effeminate looking man. Like I was there with my mother and my cousin, and then my cousin was like, yeah, that totally could be a woman. She's wearing a red garment, which is what Mary Magdalene usually wears, right? Like a red robe, and
Hmm.
holding the pen which she wrote Revelations with.
Wow.
Um, And so, in that sense, St. James is so important because he wasn't just like one of the apostles, but he was Jesus's brother in law. He was his closest disciple after Mary Magdalene. In the Last Supper, he's the first one who gets offered the chalice from which he drinks. And so, he probably had like the highest teachings of the Essenes at the time, and he brought all of that to Celtic Spain. Again, in the same way that Mary Magdalene brought all of that to France, he brought it to Spain, and then Joseph of Arimathea brings it to England. And so it was the whole Holy Family working together to bring Jesus's teachings to Europe at that time. And they did it before the Holy Roman Catholic Church could come in and kind of,
Right.
I guess, distort those teachings. So they were kind of paving the way. And yeah, Santiago is just really interesting because it became a pilgrimage site, which was competing with Rome, with the Vatican as a pilgrimage site, and with Jerusalem right after Jerusalem becomes this place that's like full of war and really difficult to get to. Santiago de Compostela becomes like an easier pilgrimage. But it's also this place that, unlike the Vatican, unlike Rome, which is kind of like the distorted, the collapsed place, Santiago is basically built on Christ's true teachings, and it's paved, like they say all roads lead to Rome, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in a sense, a lot of roads lead to Rome, but also a lot of roads lead to Santiago. And the Roman roads were built for conquest. In Perpignan, there's a road called Via Dominatia, which is Domination Road, and it was a Roman road that was built to conquer the Iberians. Um, but then, if you think about the roads that were built around the pilgrimage, they were built on devotion, they were built on prayer. These were pilgrims who were walking for their salvation, for the salvation of their family members. And so it's like these ley lines that have been carved. First of all, they were already being walked by the Celtic people before them. But once they became Christianized, they were being walked in devotion, they were being walked in prayer. And so it's just really beautiful that um, yeah, it's just kind of like the counterparts to Rome and the Vatican. It's this really beautiful anchor point of prayer, of true God. It does eventually get distorted with Santiago Matamoros, the Moor killer. It's really interesting. If you go inside Santiago Cathedral, there's like Santiago Pilgrim is like the first statue in the altar. Then there's another statue on top of that, and it's Santiago kind of crowned and like in gold. And then on top of that, there's another Santiago, and that's Santiago the Moor Killer. And it's like the built on top of this ark, and it's like completely overlaid with gold. And it's just kind of like this is the church's power, and it was built on war, and it was built on conquering the Moors, and it was yeah, it's just kind of like very clearly they're telling you what they did is kind of like they overlaid the pure, beautiful message that was originally there.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I think you mentioned this in your last in our last conversation, where you said a lot of these cities sort of sprouted from that from those paths that were paved by these pilgrims. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And like you said, it was like your journey of just birthing that heart-centered um, coherence for yourself, and through healing, through forgiveness, through your body. Um, you went through that whole hero's journey, if you will, of exploring
Hmm.
that through your own body and your own healing. So yeah, it's really beautiful to hear that story. So you said you're in Avignon right now?
I'm in Avignon, yeah, which is also very historically charged.
Is it?
Yeah. And like this all happened while I was still in Perpignan in August.
Okay.
I never go on Facebook, and just one day I was guided to go on Facebook, and I found a cat sitting offer. And so it was this woman who lives in Avignon, and she was like, I'm looking for somebody to come cat sit for me in November, I think she said. Um, and so I wrote to her, and I was like the second person to message her. And she was like, well, I already have somebody for November, but I also need somebody for December. So why don't you come in? So I like arranged this cat sitting situation back in August. Um, and then, yeah, now that I'm here, it makes sense why it had to be now, because I've been like learning so much about the Templars. And it turns out that the there was this French king who was like largely indebted to the Templars. This was like in the 1300s. It was Philip le Beau, Philip the Fair. Um, he was in a lot of debt, but he needed money because he wanted to fund all these wars. And so he ends up ordering the assassination of all of the. Well, first of all, he starts taxing the Catholic Church, which like nobody had ever done. Like, and so the church, like the Pope at the time, excommunicates him. And then he kidnaps that Pope and like basically beats him up so badly that he ends up dying. And so then he, at that time, like the conclave wasn't fully solidified. Like they were starting to have a conclave because before it was like the popes would be elected through nepotism, and that wasn't good. So they had kind of already started figuring out that they needed to have this conclave. But it wasn't fully solidified. And so Philip like takes this opportunity, like the Pope is dead. So now I'm going to install a new Pope. And he decides to install a French Pope. And instead of like having the Pope go back to the Vatican, he installs him in Avignon, which wasn't part of France at the time, but it was like right next to France at the time. Um, Avignon was part of the Kingdom of Naples. And yeah, this is all very convenient, right? So now he has this pope that's under his control. It's a French pope, and it's very close. He's living very close to him. And so then he orders this French pope to order all of the Templars be killed on Friday the 13th in 13 forget the exact date, but it was sometime in the 1300s. He orders all the Templar knights be seized all on the same day and be killed. And so he basically eliminated all the Templar knights overnight. Um, and these were the knights who had been present at the Temple of Solomon during the Crusades. They had absorbed a lot of the esoteric teachings that had been guarded by the Temple of Solomon. They brought them back to Europe. They were guarding the pilgrims. They were the bank for the pilgrims. And so they had all of these very essential roles. They were also like the precursor for like Freemasons, stonemasons. So they were building a lot of these churches. So they had all of these, they were basically very relevant for Christianity at the time. And then he essentially like orders them all killed. And this all happened here in Avignon because Avignon was the papal state for a time. And even, yeah, I think there were like seven popes over the course of 70 years, something like that. The popes apparently didn't last very long at that time. Um, and they end up like generating enough money to buy themselves from the kingdom of Naples. So now this becomes part of the papal state. So even after the Pope goes back to the Vatican, is restored to the Vatican, this is still a papal state. Until the French Revolution, this was part of the papal state. It was not part of France.
Wow. That's crazy. My goodness, you're just weaving all of these things that are so like hitting marks in my life too. Um, I've had a 13th century lifetime, which again, I haven't dug into. So perhaps there's something there for me to explore as well. And it's definitely connected to the to the Cathars and all of these holy families. I'm just looking at the map as you were speaking, Paula. It's very close to where Mary Magdalene landed, isn't it?
Yeah. Hmm.
And have you done that whole pilgrimage of Montsegur and all of those other places?
I didn't go to Montsegur. When I was in Perpignan, I was very close. Well, I was close. I was guided to go to Foix, which is another Cathar place. While I was in Perpignan, I learned about this woman called Esclairement du Foix, which means like ray of light, beam of light, of faith. And so I don't know, that just sounded so beautiful to me. And I found out that she was born in Foix, which is where I was guided to go. So I ended up going to Foix. And there was this castle there where I think is where she ended up where she grew up. And this church that was so interesting because of the amount of feminine presence that was there, like behind the altar. Usually you find like a man, but it was like um three women were there, like Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, and another woman. And then you could tell that it was a Catholic church because where, like, you know how behind the church, like all the priests would sit, right? And back then they had like a lot more priests than they do now. And so each chair was like, there was people carved onto them, but it would be like man, woman, man, woman. So you could tell that there were women priests at one point at that church.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it was just a really interesting place. Um, yeah, so I didn't go to Montsegur, but I went to Foix, and it's still on my to-do list. I've been put in touch with a Cathar elder who does guided tours into like some sacred Cathar caves. So that's kind of on my to-do list to go check out at some point in that region.
How long are you planning on staying in France?
I don't really know. Like, I'm here in Avignon until January 8th, and then I'm kind of trying to figure out where to go next.
Okay.
It still hasn't fully landed where I'll be in the new year.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been I don't know I've been wanting to do this trip to France, but again, it hasn't landed for me either. But it's still in the cards. Like I've got a friend in Gibraltar who's wanting to go as well, and so who knows? We sort of put we sort of put a rough date to it, perhaps March or April in the new year. So we'll see how that manifests. But yeah, I'm definitely wanting to do those Magnum Insights and just see where that takes me. And now with all the new discoveries that I've had, and not only with Mary Salme, but also with my connection to that 13th century lifetime that I had. So it's like I've got to first of all find out for myself historically what's been happening, but then anchor my own reality into what it is that I need to discover around these things, in these places. So yeah, France for me is like an enigma right now. I don't know the language, and it's like, this far off place somewhere in Europe that is unreachable at the moment. So it's like,
Hmm.
it's like a mystery to me that has to still be resolved. So yeah, hopefully it'll come to more light in the new year and see where it lands for me,
Yeah.
and whether I am to travel to France. That would be so exciting.
Yeah, I know that you mentioned at some point that maybe we would be pilgrimaging together in the future, so maybe that's still in the cards.
Yeah, yeah, that would be awesome. Hey, that would definitely be fun to do it with you. Yeah, we'll keep in touch. Like I know this lady in Gibraltar. Her name is Marissa, and she's become a friend over this last year, and so we've been talking on and off about doing this trip, perhaps the El Camino, and then venture into France and do that whole trip. But who knows? We're just talking about it right now, so we'll see how it manifests. So besides, this open slate, this open book that you have for the next year, what's to come, Paula, in your life? Any exciting things happening?
Um, well, similar to you, I feel like I also uncovered a lifetime, like a Cathar lifetime. And so I feel like it will be really important for me to go to those caves. I don't know when exactly, but again, I've been put in contact with this Cathar elder, and I feel like, yeah, at some point going to those caves, and then while I'm in Avignon, or maybe at some point later, I'm not sure, going to those Magdalene sites. I think while I'm here in Avignon, it's definitely feasible and possible for me to go to Sainte Marie Le Mer. I don't know about Saint Baume and the Egg Cave. I'm not sure with like the weather if it's like a bad time of the year to go there. So I heard you have to get like a 30-foot rope. And
Oh,
you have
wow.
to kind of like it's kind of like a hike to get to it. And it's something that I'm really feeling called to go to, but I'm not sure if right now is the right time to go there or not. And if I should do it on my own, like I feel like maybe it's something that I should go with someone else, just because of that whole like needing a rope and yeah. So
Wow. And that's to get just to the caves that you need the rope.
yeah, so there is one grotto, which is like the main grotto, and there's a church, and that one feels pretty accessible. But then there is another cave called the Egg Cave, and this one's like womb shaped.
I think
It
I've seen
looks like,
pictures of it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. And for that one, you have to hike down into it. But they say, like, if you don't bring a rope with you, you won't be able to get back out.
Whoa.
Um, and they also say you need a headlamp. So I think once you get in there, it is pretty dark and there's like water in there. But it sounds like it's really activating. Like the one video I found, or one of the videos I found of a woman was like crying in the same way that I had been crying when I went to the Magdalene Chapel. She was just like in tears and she didn't know why. So I feel like I definitely want to go there again. I'm just not sure if I should go alone or not. um,
Yeah, keep in
but yeah,
touch. We'll see how things go. Perhaps we're meant to travel together. So yeah, that would be beautiful and awesome. So yeah, let's keep in
yeah,
touch. So you're staying in this place, cat minding, is that what you called it?
yeah, cat sitting.
Cat sitting. And then like how has it been to travel through France? Has it been like expensive? Is it safe? Like how was your experience to just travel through France and the places that you've been so far?
It's pretty safe. It's more expensive than Spain, definitely. But when I was in Perpignan, I found an Airbnb, which is why I ended up going to Perpignan. I found an Airbnb for $450 for the whole month. And so that felt really reasonable to me. And so it's more than I was paying in rent in Mexico, but it was still doable. And then here I'm like staying for free because I'm taking care of this cat.
Hmm.
So both times it hasn't been terrible. It is expensive to travel. Like I went to Lourdes while I was in Perpignan. I went to Lourdes, and that was like a train trip. So the train ticket was a bit expensive, and then just staying in Lourdes and like food and everything. Um, Foix again was like leaving Perpignan, and so that was a little bit expensive too. But like, um, yeah, it's this mix of like, yes, it is expensive, but also like God has found a way to kind of take care of me while I'm like doing these things, especially here where I'm getting to stay for free. Um, yeah, and I don't know. I feel like car rentals aren't as expensive as they are in the US, so I may, like, if I do decide to go to this cave, I would rent a car, and then yeah, I think car rentals are like 30 or so dollars a day, which isn't really bad at all.
And do you speak French?
I do, yeah.
Oh, lucky
Not well.
you.
Like the French people are very perfectionistic, and so if they speak English and they hear my accent, they'll talk to me in English. But if they don't speak English, they will speak French to me, and they understand me. So
and you're able to understand them. So
Yeah.
that's a huge accomplishment, right? Like, yeah, just that that would be a big barrier for me to travel because I don't know French. So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. It was actually my grandmother. My mother's mother spoke like many different languages, and she taught me when I was really little. Like when she would tuck me into bed at night, she would sing to me in all these different languages. She would teach me prayers in all these different languages. So like the first things I learned in French were like prayers and songs from my grandmother when I
Oh,
was
that's so
like two,
sweet.
3 years old. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. Have you thought about journaling and just keeping like a travel log of your travels? Have you, or are you already doing that? Like you have such a rich experience, it would be awesome to document it.
Yeah, I do. I try to. And I don't know, there's days where like so much is happening all at once, and there's like so much, and every day it's like more stuff, and it's like, please leave me alone. I need to sit and integrate. Like I can't. I don't even know how to put all of this into words. I don't know how to journal it. So like there's periods of time where I'm like, all right, I need to write this down, and I'm writing it down and stuff. But then there's just like periods like this whole thing with the church in Perpignan and how it ties back to Scotland, and like that's too much to get into one journal entry, and it's just
Yeah.
so that's a little bit of where I'm at right now, is needing a little bit of time and space to reset and start writing again.
Yeah, yeah, it's awesome. No, I mean you've had all these big experiences, so it just feels like you need to somehow document it and for reflection later on, right? Even for yourself, not that,
Yeah.
not that the world needs to know what's happening in your life, but just for a personal reflection. And I'm so grateful to you for sharing these very vulnerable and personal stories with me here on this channel. So thank you for doing that. And it's always a joy to speak to you, Paula. I'm so happy to hear, how you've progressed in your life. And it's so beautiful to follow your path and just uncover for myself all of these realizations that you've had. It's so beautiful. So you think you'll go back to the States or back to Mexico?
Absolutely not the
Yeah.
States. No, when I was in Spain, we've been doing a lot of work around like dominion, right? And claiming dominion over land and like realizing where our dominion is. And it was very clear to me that Spain is that for me. And so I think
Yeah.
that I don't know how long I'll be in France, but I do know that I am supposed to go back to Spain and heal the Reconquista wound that happened there. Um, in 1492. Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue is like this rhyme that I learned in school. So that's when like the Americas were invaded by Spain and colonized by Spain, but also that same year, the Muslims and the Jews were expulsed from Spain. So it was like a huge year for Spain where it kind of like destroyed itself in such a horrific way and destroyed the New World. Um, it's a huge wound, and I just received that that's kind of like the work that I'm supposed to do, is to heal that wound somehow. And I think it involves going back to what was there before, which was this period of coexistence where like the Sufis were collaborating with the Jewish mystics and with the Christian Gnostics. There was a library with 400,000 books in Cordoba. It was like the
Wow.
golden age of Spain. And so that's kind of one of my missions prophecies, is to restore that in Spain.
Wow, that's so beautiful. And you were talking about this earlier, and I think you're the right person to be doing this work because you're able to identify those layers of what truly lies under, tourism and all of these patriarchal layers that have been overlaid on the land or in these temples and these holy sites, right? So I think you're the perfect person to be doing this pilgrimage and to healing those lands. So yeah, I really wish you all the very best for you to uncover these mysteries and to find that healing within yourself and within the lands, right? It's so beautiful. So it's like you're doing this major gridwork mission all on your own, isn't it?
Yeah, and I guess not necessarily on my own. I do have two sisters who live in Spain, who, whenever I go to Spain, I do grid work with them. And a lot of my ancestors do come from Spain. And so I feel like they're fully behind this too. Um, yeah, so it's not necessarily all on my own, but yeah, it's just finding the right connections. And like you said, I think a lot of it will happen through healing myself. Like a lot of times, grid work is really like finding those meridians within your body and healing them. And as you heal that, the land heals around you.
Yeah.
So feel like it will be a mutually beneficial relationship.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, I think when I emailed you, I sort of mentioned to you very briefly about what's coming up for me and our group here. Like we've been, I think this is going to be our 12th gridwork mission that I've been doing with two sisters here, Shekina Grace and Shekina Ma. And so there's one coming up on the 13th of December, and we are calling it Birthing Christ Consciousness. And so we would love to have you be part of that gridwork mission. Perhaps you can anchor that energy in trance and see what comes about, because we've been working with all of these throughout the year. And, Mary Magdalene, Yeshua, King Arthur, Queen Guinevere, all of these energies have been coming through like every single time, whether it's just a little bit in weaving themselves into each of our grid missions, even though we don't necessarily come into the mission saying, okay, we're going to bring in these energies. They somehow weave themselves into our gridwork mission, and it's almost been like a common theme throughout our gridwork missions. And so this time around we've named it that, birthing Christ consciousness. And so it sort of fits in with this time of the year as well, just to
Yes, it does.
bring the truth back to what is really meant to be, celebrating Christ or celebrating Yeshua and what he meant, in that during that lifetime. And so yeah, and so again, the Cathars, the Essenes, all of them just come into these missions wanting to be brought into that forefront and wanting healing to take place, for releasing to take place. And Shikina Ma, who's my co-host, recently got an impression that we needed to work with Saint Francis of Assisi, and I have to explore why that's coming forth and so strongly. And so she's been receiving that, along with the healing to take place in Ireland as well. And so it's all of these landmarks, are just revealing themselves as we go into this final stretch of that gridwork mission that's coming up on the 13th of December. And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what we eventually end up doing. China was another place that came up. Healing is required in China, and so yeah, we're still sort of fine tuning what this mission is all about. But Shekinah Grace has also been getting like all of the divine feminine saints who were oppressed and beheaded and martyred, for just being themselves.
Mm.
And particularly one that keeps coming into her reality is Saint Agnes. And they couldn't really kill her because, she was so strong in her faith and, yeah, just so landed in her divinity that no matter what they tried, she just wasn't able to succumb to their torture and their ways in which they wished to suppress her. So all of these saints are in a way coming up for healing and wanting to be acknowledged for their work.
Yeah. I don't know what's coming up as you mentioned. Well, first of all, it does feel very aligned to be part of this grid work mission. Like you said, I'm here and it would be good to have someone anchor in that energy. But yeah, what's coming up for me with St. Francis of Assisi is that he also has a pilgrimage. It's called Via Francigena. Um, but his pilgrimage starts in the United Kingdom in Canterbury. Like, I don't know if you've heard about the Canterbury Tales.
Yeah, a little bit,
That
but go on.
pilgrimage is about the Via Francigena, which is a pilgrimage to St. Francis of Assisi.
Wow.
And yeah, that's just what's coming up around that is that another pilgrimage site. It was Saint Sigeric who did that pilgrimage and like made popularized it, made it known through the Canterbury Tales and all of that. Um, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, see, all of these little bits and pieces are like puzzle pieces, they come back and they just fall into place. So thank you. Yeah, it's awesome. And I think your knowledge and your historical background and information is just so beautiful. Like you know so much about these places. So it'll be awesome to have you as another sister joining our group. And so it'll be lovely to have you for that Gridwork mission.
Yeah.
So, was there anything in closing, Paula, you wanted to say to mention?
Um, I guess a little bit, one last thing around Avignon is that, and this is something that I just found out today, and I'm still kind of like sitting with teasing out the pieces, but I don't know if you know about the Vatican was built on top of an ancient Etruscan oracular site.
Yes, you mentioned that the last
Um,
time.
so was Avignon. Avignon used to be an ancient oracular site.
Wow. Yeah,
And
that's crazy.
so there's something really weird about the Roman Catholic Church building on top of these oracular sites. In the case of Avignon, I know that the popes were kind of like using the grid, the ley line here, like they would have dreams and they would write down their dreams. I don't know if you know about Catherine of Siena, but she lived here and she received oracular visions. And yeah, again, it's something that I just found out today and I'm still kind of like trying to figure out, but interesting connection.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, we'll definitely unravel all of this. So, yeah, just keep your ears and eyes open, and I know you do, but just from the perspective of this gridwork mission that's coming up. And I'll send you the links to it as well, so you keep that in your mind as you go through your day and anchor that light in France. So it's all very exciting. I'm so grateful to you for having this conversation and sharing your experiences with us. So thank you, Paula, once again for being here.
Yeah,
And
I'm
I'm
really
sure
grateful
we'll
to you
definitely
too.
keep in touch. Yeah. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Mm.
I'll put all the links and contact for Paula in the description. So I look forward to hearing from you in the future, and we'll perhaps do a little clip from our gridwork mission and post that on the next video on YouTube. So thank you, everybody. Namaste.
Namaste.